Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August Knowledge Management webinar with APQC. Our topic today is one of my favorites and what I believe is still at the heart of knowledge management, where we center around people, and that is communities of practice. So thanks for joining us. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the presentation and the recording following the webinar. These assets are also going to be published in our resource library at apqc.org, and a summary of the discussion from today will be made available in an article format to the members of APQC in about 4 to 6 weeks' time. All the companies and names that are mentioned during the webinar will be anonymized in the article, just for your knowledge. Today, myself, Lynda Braksiek, I'm the research lead for knowledge management here at APQC. And I'm joined today by our friend Stan Garfield, longtime author, speaker, mentor, teacher, and founder and facilitator of the SIKM leadership community. And I will add, a contributor to APQC in research over many years, blogs, articles, interviews, and events like this. So welcome back, Stan. Stan has decades of experience in managing knowledge for technology and consulting companies. And he's witnessed firsthand the importance of cross-functional collaboration and is widely known for his expertise in developing effective and long-lasting communities of practice. So if you joined us last year about this time in our back-to-school edition of webinars, Stan shared with us his years of experience and insights and his kind of step-by-step process in building communities. This year, we're going to be talking about some of our latest research, and he's going to share some insights with us. So I will start with some upcoming opportunities, as always, dig into a little bit of our most recent research and some insights into that. And then we're going to have a little fireside chat with Stan. And I was reminded just a little while ago that it maybe needs to be a poolside chat this time of year because it's a little warm outside. So it's a good thing we're virtual because it's a little warm for fires. But with that being said, we will close out the webinar with then some tips and tricks and proven practices and resources for you to take away and hopefully continue to build on your community program, or if you're just getting started, help you get started. So the first thing, again, I always like to share is upcoming engagements with APQC. We'd love to have all of you join us for webinars. We've actually got some great webinars coming up with guest speakers. We've got a sponsored webinar coming up in October where we're going to be talking about knowledge loss due to the great retirement crisis that a lot of people are experiencing right now with e-gain. And in November, I'm really happy that we have Tom Davenport coming to talk to us about AI and the hidden power of unstructured data. So please join us for that. If you see on the left side, I've mentioned here a class that's coming up very timely in a couple of weeks where you can spend 4 hours with Darcy Lemons from our advisory group here at APQC talking about designing and sustaining communities of practice. Great course if you're interested. And then as always, we have a roundtable coming up for third quarter in September where we will be talking about collaboration. And we're going to be joining forces with our supply chain audience as well. So please come if you can and visit. We want to talk about collaboration and all those great things that knowledge management professionals know and help that supply chain audience really dig in and figure out how to collaborate better across the supply chain. And then as always, if you're interested, we have knowledge manager and knowledge transfer certification programs here at APQC, which are amazing. So if you have an opportunity to attend those, we invite you to do that. Okay, so research and insights on communities. It's been a while since APQC has done a deep dive into community research, and so we decided to redo some of that this year. Communities and networks continue to really play a central role in a lot of organizations, and they're driven by priorities like capturing and transferring knowledge, advancing your KM maturity for your programs, or promoting knowledge sharing practices in general. And with AI technologies rapidly evolving and reshaping tools that support communities, we have to remember that the foundational elements of communities haven't changed for a very long time, and we want to always go back and revisit those and make sure that we're not losing sight of those essentials. So early this year, we conducted a survey of knowledge management professionals to look at the current state of communities and the capabilities of communities of practice. So this was intended to confirm a lot of some established practices, uncover new insights, related to things like program design, implementation strategies, technology support, and the cultural and change management components that are necessary to ensure that we're embedding this practice into our organizations. So, as always, we like to start our webinars with a poll. So before we dig into research, let's take a look at our first poll. I like to get a feeling of where everybody is at who's on the call today with your journey in communities. So take a look at the poll. Let us know, are you just getting started? Are you in a standardization mode? Are you optimizing? What are you doing? So let us kind of know where you are in your journey. And just so you know, anywhere is fine. We have something for everyone in this call today. And we did ask this question in the survey that we did for our research as well. So I'm curious to know what the mix of people are today compared to what we found in those that responded to our survey. Can everyone see the poll? I can, hopefully. You can answer it in the poll if you would. Okay, cool. Thank you. And when you think we have critical mass there, Lauren, you can go ahead and post those results. Oh, so we have a lot of people that are in that just getting started and developing stage, but we do have a few in standardization or optimizing or really innovating. So hopefully those of you that are in that optimizing and innovating, please be popping those best practices in the chat throughout. We love to see the conversation happening throughout the webinar today. And I'm looking at the results of our survey as well, and we had a few more people that were a little more mature in their programs that responded to the survey. So hopefully some of this research is helpful to you all who are getting started. And I know our conversation with Stan will be helpful to you. It's always awesome to hear his insights. All right, so we're going to get started. Just to making sure, I like to level set with a topic that we're talking about to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, kind of in the same way. So this is a little bit about what communities are and what they're not. I think most of us kind of get that this is a group of people who come together to share and learn from one another, typically held together by a common interest. And communities do have a life cycle. Some of them are not meant to last forever. Some of them do. Some of them are short-lived. It depends on the objectives in your organization and what critical knowledge is really needed to be shared at that time. It's also about focusing on sharing experiences, sharing those lessons and insights related to a specific topic or a discipline area. It's really driven, communities are driven a lot by desire and passion, right? People who really want to share insights, solve problems together. And the communities can perform a variety of different tasks. Some of them are just for learning and sharing. Some of them have very specific goals they want to achieve or problems they want to solve together that can be placed back in the organization and implemented for everyone. So make sure that you, as we go through this, think about how they're structured in your organization or how you want them to be structured. They're also known by a lot of names. A lot of different organizations call them something different. We stick to the standard terminology of communities of practice. When I say that, it could mean networks, it could mean knowledge sharing networks, it could mean learning forums. Whatever you call them in your organization is okay. It needs to align with kind of how your culture embraces it. But what they are not is just a project team. They're not part of the organizational structure, and they are not just about technology. It's about getting people together. Now, what do they do? And this is based on our research as well. These are kind of the top practices of communities. They are there to capture and transfer best practices. Sometimes that transfer happens only in the conversations. Sometimes the meetings are recorded, transcripts are made, and they're put into actual document format that people can share. Again, it depends on how you're doing it in your organization. But we do advise you, when you can, make sure this stuff gets captured so it can be reused. That's the whole purpose. It's about sharing lessons. It's about bringing those things that we've done maybe not so well in the past so that others can learn from that. It's also about sharing the things that we've done really well so that others can learn from that and go forward. It's also about providing access to experts and expertise. It's very challenging when someone's new in an organization. They're trying to advance their career maybe in a different direction. They just don't know everything that's going on. They don't know where to get started with a problem. This is a great way to bring people together. So the experts in the organization are at the critical heart of communities, and bringing them together and sharing that level of expertise, whether you're just beginning or whether you've been doing it for 40 years, it's important to bring those folks together. It's also considered a professional development and training opportunity for most people as well. It's a great way to meet other people, develop mentoring relationships, and again, really just see what's happening across the organization and learn more about the business, learn more about your topic area, your discipline. I like communities that dig in and solve real problems and generate those new innovative ideas as well. Some are very specific about doing this. Sometimes it comes up by chance in a learning environment as well. But when you can take something from a community and go help solve a business problem or generate new innovative ideas that can be taken back to the business and implemented, I think you're really doing something special as well when you can do that. And overall, it's really there to enhance and improve that ability to collaborate across boundaries. One organization that I interviewed last year, I love what they said, is that really it's about trying to make the company feel smaller, right? This was someone from Collins Aerospace. Hopefully she doesn't mind me saying Mel. I'm not sure if Mel's on the call today, but she said, it's all about bringing people together and making the company feel smaller because we're a really large organization. It makes us feel like a small town in a large environment. So I love that analogy. All right, now into a little bit of the research to help you understand. We get a lot of questions. People want to know how are communities structured in other organizations? What should it look like in mine? And the answer is always, it depends. It depends on your culture. It depends on what's needed in your organization. Now, for many years, we've always said that, and I grew up this way too, thinking about communities as we need to make them available to everyone. And that's usually the utopian environment that you're looking for, is that communities are part of the culture. They're there for everyone. They're at an enterprise level. But we're finding a lot in our research. You can see here that over half of the people who responded said that their communities are actually governed at the functional level, meaning a business unit or a specific function. And I will say that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes that's a place to start, right? It offers you greater flexibility because it's within a specific function. It allows the business units to take a general model for COPs, but perhaps tailor it a little bit to a specific discipline area. Maybe engineering handles them a little different than manufacturing, than maybe the supply chain, and that's okay. I still believe that an overall structure that defines it the same way, calls it the same way, uses the same technology is the best way to go. But we do have a lot of people managing them in functions. And I think a lot of this has to do with the size of the organization as well. Very large organizations typically start in the functional area. They can be both formal and informal. I know the definitions look a little bit complex here on the screen, but overall, it's pretty even here between functional managed communities. Some are more informal, meaning there isn't a real standard way to start up a community, but anyone can. Formal means there's a very standard governed approach, and you go through a process to start your community of practice. Now, on the flip side of that, the enterprise level, we've got the same. We've got about 40% of the organizations said they're at the enterprise level. About a quarter of the people said it's formal. We've got them centrally governed. They're available and funded for the entire organization, and we have a very specific way that we manage them. But there was also 16% that said it's enterprise level, but anybody can start it. There's no centralized governance or funding that exists. So lots of different ways you can do it. We're going to talk a little bit about what we believe some of the best practices and the best ways to do this are. But I wanted you to see the types of people who are responding to our research. Also, from the program responsibility, again, this is really following this line of the functional area, kind of managing the responsibility for communities. You can see the primary teams responsible really are around the functional or business unit area, but there's also a functional KM or an enterprise KM team. So we have about a third of being managed by KM, a third managed by functional areas, and then there's some others that fall in there as well, centers of excellence or maybe a board or a committee. Sponsorship is a little bit different here. Almost half said that they're sponsored by a functional area or a business unit. This one was interesting to me to see community leaders listed as the sponsor. This might be more in line with people who are doing them more informally, so there isn't an overall sponsor for the program itself. I find this one a little bit perplexing, so I might want to dig into this one a little bit more. But we also see some sponsorship around the KM team or maybe a business center of excellence or a board or a committee as well. But really following in line is what we're seeing is a lot being managed by the functional or business unit areas. From a connection and involvement perspective, this is showing us how employees actually get involved in communities of practice. This one you could answer more than one question. That's why it doesn't equal 100%. And I'm missing the number on face-to-face meetings. Sorry about that. How employees get involved with COPs, though, from a voluntary perspective, 3/4 of the organization said it's voluntary. But they also make sure that they're inviting people. So they're trying to be proactive in who they invite to make sure they're including the right levels of expertise. Even if it is voluntary, they're still doing an invitation to a lot of people. I was curious that almost 1/3 of the people said it's actually required, right? It's part of their performance goals. It's part of their job. They are required to be a part of a community of practice, which is newer to me. I haven't seen that as much in the past. And I'd be curious, Stan, if you've ever seen a lot of the whole requirement of communities of practice in your experience.
Well, I would say that there's a mixture there of voluntary in that you want people to choose which community to join, but it's good to have a requirement that they join at least one. So we had a rule like that when I was leading KM program, and we didn't ever force anyone to join one, but we said we want everyone to belong to at least one, hopefully one that's relevant to their work.
Yeah, I like that. It feels a little less cumbersome to say required in that way, right? We'd love everybody to join at least one as part of your job. Now, how, excuse me, how people connect. Virtual meetings, obviously off the charts, and since COVID, this has just continued to rise, right? This is how we join now. And this is what we're doing today, right? Through a virtual meeting. So I think that's great. I love that 2/3 of the people said that they have an online discussion forum as well, which I think is fantastic because one of the struggles of communities is always how do you maintain the conversation and the activity between meetings, right? So having an online discussion forum, activities people can do, ways they can connect ongoing, I think is really, really valuable. And the face-to-face meetings, I don't know why the number is missing from the chart. I think it was there before. I can't remember. I think it's about half, close to half. I think it was 40.
Lynda, it's 47%. It's showing up in our slides, just not on the screen for some reason.
Oh, yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, I knew it was close to half. So close to half of the people are still having face-to-face meetings. This one actually surprised me quite a bit. When I started in communities 25 years ago, it was all about face-to-face meetings, right? And over time, it's evolved. But I'm actually happy to hear that there's still a lot of face-to-face meetings going on because I think just a lot of great collaboration and activity happens when you're face-to-face. So I love this. I think it's awesome. And before, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about AI as it relates to communities of practice, because AI is leading the conversation in all things related to KM and all other areas of the world right now, is it not? So we did ask some questions related to artificial intelligence and have you done anything with AI for your communities of practice? And it was interesting to see that we actually have quite a few people who are managing communities using some capabilities to help augment and improve and evolve the way they are managing their community. So we've got some are actually operating, very few operating and optimizing how they're doing it, but we've got a lot implementing and piloting, and 1/3 of them are even evaluating it. So very few are not considering it at all. So AI has impacted every practice within knowledge management, and communities, even though they are about people first, it's still something that's going to aid us. It makes for better meeting management. You can see that the common use cases that were used here were really around, I think, what we're using AI for in a lot of cases, but it's around quicker discovery of those assets that we want our community members to find, making sure that meetings are managed more effectively. We've got transcripts, we've got, summaries, we've got all of those things. And even those communities that are heavily focused on creating content and managing content and assets for their community, they're using AI to help support that as well. Things like chatbots and using some automation capabilities to make things more efficient. All of those things are out there as well. Okay, now with all of that, I want to jump in and talk to the expert. Again, Fireside chat. Should have thought of the pool. I know I should have, but it's Fireside. I'm clear north in Wisconsin, so it's cool enough for a fire here. So we're going to go with Fireside chat. But Stan, we thank you so much for joining us and just lending your insights for us today. And I have some specific questions for Stan that I thought I would put out there, but as always, feel free to put something in the chat if you would like to add to or want Stan to expand on anything. And before we start, Stan, I'll just tell everybody too that at the end of our presentation where I put all of the resources from APQC, I've also put resources from Stan. Stan has some fantastic resources that he's written and things you can access to give you more insights and more ideas around how to make your communities more effective. So make sure you check those out. But first question for you, Stan. How have communities evolved over the past decade? I can say or more, because you've been around them for multiple decades now.
Yes, I have. And in fact, I had my first experience with an online community when I joined Digital Equipment Corporation in 1983. So we're talking over 40 years. And I'd answer the question by saying that not much has changed over those 4 decades, because it's really just about the things you've been highlighting. It's about getting people interacting online, interacting in person, participating in shared events, exchanging information with each other. And, some of the technology's changed along the way, but the technology existed back then and it exists today. So I'd say fundamentally, not much has changed, and that's fine. What we've seen change over time, some of the platforms have come and gone. There's been some evolution. The platforms today can look more like social media tools than the old listservs, but the underlying functionality of having online discussions is the same. And the other thing I've seen change maybe over the last 10 or 15 years is that the discipline of community management has become more institutionalized, primarily in the consumer world, in the customer community world. It's very common now for brands to have community managers as a typical job that they go out and fill. Now, that's not necessarily knowledge management. It's more related to brand management, but nonetheless, the role is very similar, right? So customer community is not that different from an employee community. So the fact that community management is now defined as a role, that you'll see jobs posted for that, that's something I think that's changed and something that we can take advantage of, because we can say, yeah, we need that role as well. So when I wrote my book about communities, I call it the Community Management Handbook, because to me, that's the topic that's become more recognized than it was. The other thing I think that's changed is that the platforms that are offered for communities have changed over time. We used to have more that were dubbed enterprise social network platforms. There's fewer of those today. There's plenty of platforms that exist for customer communities. There's probably fewer that exist for enterprise communities. So that's another thing that's changed.
I love that. I love the focus on the consumer side of things, Stan. I don't know if anyone on the call has experience with any of that. Please throw something in the chat. But also, would you say that the principles are the same, though, whether you're managing it on that side or whether you're managing it for employees? The principles for communities remain basically the same?
Yes, they do. The difference is the objectives. For a customer-oriented community, it might be much more about trying to build the brand and having good customer relations, but the mechanics of the communities are pretty much identical. You have a community manager or a community leader that's trying to make sure the community is working well. You have the members who are trying to learn about the topic and interact with each other and help each other out. So to me, the mechanics and the fundamentals are the same. The objectives can be slightly different.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. All right, we're going to move on to the next one, because this is the one where I think a lot of people will get some maybe need some guidance and would love to hear your wisdom on this. But what are the most common reasons that communities might fail to actually gain traction?
So there's a number that I'll go through. I mean, the first is usually around what's the topic of the community. Often it goes wrong right there. So you've got to pick a topic that people recognize and identify with, that's widely understood. And then there has to be something compelling about it to cause people to want to join it. So the typical reason someone joins a community is they see the name of the community and they say, yeah, that's what I do. And I want to join so I can connect with other people doing that as well. So if you've picked a topic that people can't recognize, can't identify with, don't believe that that's what they do, they're less likely to join it. Furthermore, if it's too broad or too narrow, the topic can get in the way, right? So if it's a real narrow niche topic, there won't be as many people joining it. It won't reach critical mass. If it's too broad, you'll have too much noise in the community. So you got to pick sort of the right level of granularity where you get critical mass without overwhelming volumes of posts. You don't want to have multiple communities on the same topic. That'd be another problem that I've run into. So if a user who's deciding to join a community is presented with several that have the same topic, they may not join any of them because they'll be confused about which one they should join. They'll just give up. So you want to have one topic, one community for one topic, so it's obvious, and that everyone interested in that topic is in the same place. It's not broken up and fragmented into several different ones. You have to have a community leader that has the interest, the time, the passion for leading the community. If someone's assigned to do it and they don't really want to do it, that's going to be probably a negative predictor of the community success. But if they love the subject and they're willing to spend some of their own time leading it and nurturing it, that's another important thing. If you have a community where there are online discussions, but those aren't active, there haven't been any posts in a long time, or if there are questions that have been asked that have never been answered, that's a bad sign, right? So someone looking to join the community will look at that and see that and go, oh, I'm not going to join that community. There's nothing going on in it. Or if you're a member and you see that you posted a question and you had to maybe summon up some courage to even post it, but then no one ever answers you, you're going to get discouraged and you probably won't come back and ask again. Plus the other members will see that and go, well, why should I bother? No one's helping. So you got to make sure that the community leader's monitoring that and making sure the questions get answered. Another problem can be that the community culture is negative, meaning that if you post something, somebody may jump on you and criticize you, and there may be a lot of people carrying on arguments that kind of turn you off. If that kind of culture exists in a community, that can be off-putting. But if there's a welcoming culture where people are thanked and praised for participating, and there's never any negative consequence to asking a question, then that's important. If the organizational culture doesn't support collaboration, right? So I've been in organizations where the culture is very much conducive to it and the communities have thrived. I've also been in ones where it's not, and people are more cautious and secretive. And if that's the culture of your organization, it can be harder to have communities thrive in that because it's just not the way things are done. You might have leaders who give lip service to communities but don't really support it. So you really want them not only to say they want to support it, but actually do so. And that can include actually leading by example. Like one of the best ways for communities to thrive is if the senior leaders participate directly. That may be very minimal. It may just be thanking somebody once in a while or responding to a post. But the fact that they would do that would lead many other people to follow their lead. A lot of times you'll find that they're not using any one channel for discussions, right? So the communities exist, but then people are carrying out discussions in email and in chat and in text. And if it's not all sort of directed back into the community structure, you're going to miss out on a lot of what the value of the community would be. If you have a platform that you're using that's not well suited to communities, that's a problem. So that often happens. People will start up using a Teams approach as opposed to an Engage approach in the Microsoft world. They might start out trying to use a Slack channel, or they may even be using email, or they're trying to use some tool that isn't ideal for communities or for scaling up as communities grow. So picking the right platform that's well suited is important. And then the final thing I'd mention would be if there are no incentives of any kind for participating communities. In fact, if there's negative incentives, if you're criticized for wasting time in the community, that will work against you. But if there's praise and recognition and rewards, and you get good results from being an active community member, then that will help the community structure to thrive. So it's important that there's some kind of recognition as opposed to people being slapped on the wrist for spending time there.
I love that. Those are all amazing. The one, and we've probably, everybody who's on the call who's been a part of communities has probably experienced one or more of these at some point throughout our journey, right? So hopefully some of the things that Stan mentioned will help you kind of maybe think a little differently, and hopefully we're going to talk about some practices at the end of this webinar, you start thinking about maybe how you can address some of these things. I had one more question for you. The one thing we talk a lot about when communities start having a, defining your purpose and having maybe a charter and specific things that you do want to focus on to make sure that people do understand what kind of a community they're a part of and all that. Do you think if a community doesn't do things like that, have a charter and a very specific purpose that they use to get a community started and launched, that impacts whether it can actually take off or not too, Stan?
I think that could be helpful, Lynda. I don't know that you have to have that. I've seen plenty of communities without any formality at all be very successful. Yep. So it's more about the topic and the members' passion for the topic and a leader who helps nurture all of that than it is about formality. The formality can be helpful. I'm not arguing against it, but I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's more important to, the steps to follow are to make sure that you've got the right set of communities, that you don't have redundant ones or overlapping ones, that you don't have missing topics that are important, but for which there's no community. So if you can do work to build your set, so you have exactly one community for each important topic, and then you have leaders willing to lead those communities, and then you encourage people to join them, and then they pay attention, I think that's the formula for success.
Okay, cool. And Lauren just informed me that we have some questions in the Q&A that I might access if I can. For some reason, I can't see Q&A, Lauren. If there's one or two that you want to...
I can read them out too. That's fine.
Perfect.
So you're talking about platforms, and that was one question that someone asked is, what are good examples of accessible tools for community of practice to make meetings more engaging? So I'm not sure if they're looking for tools specific to meetings or community platforms in general, but maybe some examples for tools.
Okay, so for meetings, pretty much any tool like we're using here, Zoom, or Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams. We use freeconferencecall.com for the SICAM leaders community. Anything that allows us to have this kind of discussion is fine for a meeting. It will depend a little bit about what's the standard in your organization, what do people typically use, and you want to probably use the same one. And then to the extent possible, does it integrate with other things? So if you're in a Microsoft shop, you're probably going to use Teams, and that integrates with Outlook, and that integrates with SharePoint, and integrates with Engage, and that's a plus. So, but any tool like we're using today can work fine for meetings, and it doesn't even have to have video. We do the SRCAM calls, we do them as audio calls. So even that can work fine. And as far as the online portion of it, as I mentioned in the Microsoft world, the best tool for that is Engage. That's what Microsoft would tell you to use for communities. It allows for threaded discussions. It can be used to scale up as communities grow. It's such that you can go back and find the discussion. So that'd be a tool that I'd recommend in general for online communities.
Love that.
Great. Yeah.
Maybe one more, Lauren, before we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few in here now, but I'll go back to, I think, Stan, you mentioned this just a moment ago when you talk about critical mass, and someone asked, what does it mean to have critical mass in a community, and what is missing if you don't have it?
All right, so critical mass, we've actually done research to try to figure out what's the sort of minimum number and size of community. And I've always said that it was 100 people, but actually found that 200 was a better number. But the reason for that is based on the rule of thumb that says that 90% of a community is unlikely to ever post. So if your community size is small, that number, the flip side of that 10% becomes too small for a community to thrive. So think about a community that has only 10 people in it. It's unlikely that anybody other than the person that started the community is ever going to post in it, right? So that's not going to lead to success. If you get up to 100, then 10% of the community is 10 people. And if 10 different people are posting, that's viable. And as you get to 1,000 member community, then 100 people are likely to post. And even the 1% of that is still 10 people are likely to post frequently. So the rule of thumb is in fact sort of a law of nature. You can't overcome it. That's just the way it is. Our research shows that. So instead of trying to fight it, just accept it and say the answer to it is to have a large number of members. Sometimes people will ask me, is it possible to have too many members? And fundamentally, the answer is no. There's no maximum number. The issue isn't the size of the community, it's more about the volume of activity. If you have a community where the posts are so frequent that it's overwhelming, then you probably want to cut that community, split it up so it gets to a manageable volume level. But if that doesn't happen, you could have a community that has 20,000 members, and if the posting volume is acceptable, that's great, because all 20,000 of those people can be learning and benefiting. So it's not really about size, it's more about the frequency of posts. But at the lower numbers, you're going to have an infrequent volume of posts, and that's really the problem with most communities. I've never really seen a community that's too active. I've seen plenty of communities that are inactive.
I love that. It is about the volume of the activity, and it's about the engagement of the people that come together. And we're going to talk about engagement in just a minute. And the only caveat I'm going to say to that is that in my experience, there were certain topics within the organizations that I worked for that maybe couldn't have quite as many people just because the topic didn't lend itself to that. But they were very active communities because they were so passionate about the area, and it was such a critical area for the business. So larger is, like you said, is always better because you get a lot of people who aren't going to contribute. But sometimes the size of your company might not allow that, or the topic area could be critical, but there's not 200 people that know enough about it, right, to come together and learn. So could
Right,
be,
there could be exceptions to any rule. I just haven't seen
yeah.
any. But I also
Yeah.
think that in a small organization, people ask me, what do we do in a small organization? And I say, why don't you just have a single community, right? If you have a 200-person company, just have
Get
one
together.
community, and then that's great because you won't miss anything. Right? There's no
That's right.
splitting up into silos. And as the
Yeah.
company grows, you may split it up because it'll get bigger,
Yeah.
which is probably a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But initially, single community will do the trick.
I love that. It's a great example. Here at APQC, we're a small company, and we actually have a channel that has every person in the organization in it, and it's a place where we can share not only business things, but also personal things sometimes too, right? Things that are going on. First day of school pictures, all that kind of stuff. But it's a community. It's a place where everyone can go and gather and talk about what's going on at APQC. So it's a perfect example, Stan. I love that. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. Now, don't worry, there's lots of questions. If there's lots of questions in the Q&A, we will make sure that we get answers to these questions, and we will make them available in the summary write-up that we have, and we'll get those from Stan. Stan, you didn't know you were going to have homework after this as well, right? You're going to help us answer a few more questions maybe that are posted in the Q&A, but we'll make sure that we get some answers to all those questions, because I know everybody's got some good ones. So I do want to talk about the role of leaders, though, because leadership is so important to the success of a community, which you have already talked about. But how do you see the role of community leaders evolving as we move into, and probably over time it already has, but do you see it evolving at all because of things like AI, or the fact that we have hybrid work environments and most things are virtual now? Maybe just talk a little bit about that role of the leader a little bit more.
Sure, and that was one point that I actually had in relation to the question about what can you do to course correct. I think a community of community leaders is a really essential thing to have. So if you don't already have one of those, that would be a good community to form, because if you have a community of community leaders, that's where you can also show them by example how to lead a community. So I always felt like if I was going to tell my community leaders how I wanted them to lead a community, I shouldn't just be telling them, I should be showing them. So form a community of community leaders. Let that be a place where they can exchange good ideas amongst themselves. They can hear from the others what they're struggling with, what that's going well for them. But you also get to demonstrate to them how you lead it. And then they can follow that example in leading their communities. As far as how the community leadership role evolves, similar to my initial answer to your first question, it hasn't changed that much over time. The role of community leader is pretty much the same. The thing that's changed is not so much that we've had hybrid work, because communities have often been a source of dealing with that, right? You use communities to connect people across organizational boundary. We call that boundary spanning. And so whether they're physically together or whether in other parts of the world, communities have done a great job of bringing those people together. But in the area of AI, you've already indicated it's an opportunity for us that I think we still have yet to exploit, right? So I can tell you a lot of things that AI could do for us as community leaders, but probably we aren't there yet, right? And that's the general challenge, I think, for us all in KM. using AI is not just to use it in superficial use cases that we've already sort of touched the surface with, as glorified search engines and writing stuff for us, but more important is to actually pick out processes that we may be doing manually today that it could do, right? So as an example, if we were to take all of the discussions in a community and have AI pointed at that, and it allows it to go in there and use that as a way of answering questions or summarizing previous discussions or being able to retrieve things that might be otherwise hard to retrieve, that would be one example. If you think about how to handle tagging threads, that's a manual process. Well, it could probably do that for us, maybe do it better than some of the people tagging it today. Could it summarize our meetings and calls? Yes, that could do things like that. Could it help answer questions that are otherwise unanswered in the community by going back and looking at some of the previous threads? Yes, it could do that. Could it be used for mentoring, where someone comes in and takes advantage of all of discussions that have gone on and uses that as a way of mentoring a new member of that profession? In the case of the SICAM leaders community, we have 20 years of discussions. We should be able to take advantage of that, and AI can help us with that. And there's lots of other things that it can do, but I think the challenge for us as community leaders would be figure out some really practical use case that's yet unexploited, roll up your sleeves, really figure out a way of, by interacting with some of our AI tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and Copilot, and figure out how, by continuing to interact with it, we can turn it into something far more capable than just a glorified search engine.
Yeah. I love that. I just keep sitting here thinking, ooh, our next piece of research as we go forward, right? What are those true use cases that are innovative as it relates to communities of practice and other areas of knowledge management as well? I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for the insights. We could have a whole hour or more just talking to Stan about some of this stuff, but I wanna thank you for that, your fireside chat insights there, Stan. And we're going to close with going into just a few proven practices that we're seeing as well. And feel free to keep popping things in the chat. We go back and review all of this, make sure we answer the questions, listen to each other. I see people talking back and forth to each other, so I love that. Learn from one another. And I just wanted to make one comment. Mel from Collins Aerospace put in there, Stan, that at Collins, it's called COP squared. That's the Community for Community Leaders, which I think is a fun name. And but yes, that Community for Community Leaders is just a great concept. So if you haven't done that yet and you have more than one community in your organization, highly recommend doing something like that. It's extremely valuable. So thank you. Okay, we're going to go to another poll because we want to hear, after all of this discussion, quickly, what are the biggest challenges you are facing with your community? Even if you're just getting started, what are the things you might be worried about or that you're not quite sure how to handle? Or if you're more mature, what are the things that you deal with and haven't been able to solve yet? Or maybe you're in the process of solving and you can share some of those practices with us too. But tell us what those biggest challenges are that your organization might face with communities. And if it's not on the list here, please throw something else in the chat. That's okay. We don't claim to have all of the answers to every challenge that everyone's facing. So we'll give you just a minute here. Oops, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to do that. All right, do we have answers yet? All right. So member engagement is number 1. Leadership support is also up there, along with aligning to business priorities. And measurement, not surprising. Oh yeah, some people said they could select more than one answer as well. We made this a single choice because we wanted to know what's your top, but great point, Jan. You could have selected maybe more than one, and that's okay. Oh, thanks, Stan. Thanks. Stan put a link to his book on the community management guide. What's it called? The Guide to Community Management? Is that right?
Handbook of Community Management.
Thank you. So take a look at that if you want. Cassandra wanted to choose all 5 options. Love that. I don't love that, but you know what I mean. They can all be challenging. So All right. Okay, we're going to move on, and I'm going to show you from our research then. The reason I asked that question was to understand, but also show you that these were the success factors that were identified by the people who responded to our survey. And surprisingly, member engagement was also listed as the #1 critical success factors, but it also happens to be one of the greatest challenges. And something that Stan reminded me of as we were preparing for this webinar was that what does engagement mean to you in your organization? One of the biggest challenges with dealing with engagement is to simply define, what does it mean to you? What does engagement look like from a success perspective? Does it mean that it's just about people showing up? Is it about the number of contributions that you get? Is it that you need everyone to contribute? Do you want a certain amount of people to contribute? Do you have all of the subject matter experts, a critical mass, right, of those experts that you need to make that community successful? So make sure you're defining, when you say you want member engagement, make sure you're defining what does that mean and what does that success look like to you in your organization. Some of the other areas on here that we talked about, does the culture support it? Do you have leadership support? A lot of these things are aligned with those challenges that you're having today, but they are critical to the success of communities as well. So because of that, we have some, I call this a checklist for successful communities. This is actually based not just on our recent research, but on our several years and decades of research at APQC of those critical components that really need to be in place when you're thinking about starting up, managing, sustaining, evolving, and continually improving communities of practice. Keep all of these things in mind and make sure that you are addressing these things. And you can align each of these items on the checklist back to a critical success factor. For instance, the first things you need to think about is that your community has a clear business purpose, right? It shouldn't be something that is unrelated to your business or a topic that is not critical to the success and the value of your organization, along with making sure that it's you're aligning it to the critical business intent. These first two are somewhat related, but they are very much tied to that alignment of business objectives we talked about in the success criteria. The other thing is that with the funding model, this one has changed, I think, over time. Funding used to, I think, be a bigger barrier sometimes to getting communities started. It probably depends on your organization. Based on our research, there was a third of people that said they weren't even sure how the budgeting process worked for communities. It was just something people did in their organization, right? About another third of people said they actually just managed the budget as they needed it. If they needed budget, they went to leadership for support and worked on getting it. There was about 15% of our survey respondents said they don't have a budget at all. This is all voluntary within the organization. So just make sure you know what that looks like in your organization. Do you need funding? Are people charging their time? So can they attend a meeting without it impacting their organization's budget, things like that. Also, the leadership. This is a big part of it. We talked about this, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into leadership, but it's important that you have the right leaders. It's important that you are linking communities to the overall knowledge management system in your organization. If you have not done that already, I really highly encourage you to make communities part of a greater knowledge management strategy. It tends to be supported and governed more effectively when it is tied to that larger ecosystem. You have to promote communities. People need to understand why they would even want to attend, right? That understanding, what's in it for me? Why would I do this? Why is it important to me? Get me excited. What's the hook to get someone into a community? They also should be organic. I know some organizations struggle with this concept a little bit, but they need to allow the people who have passion for the topics to be able to bring those ideas to fruition as well and say, I believe we need a community on this. It supports these business objectives. Here's why I believe it's important. And we need to allow people the voluntary activity to be able to be a part of communities as well. And then, as with anything, we need to make sure that we're measuring the health of our community. If you can't, somebody always told me you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So let's make sure we understand how this is bringing value to the organization. So again, just a quick checklist, lots of resources available for each of these kind of areas within our resource library, but With that being said, I wanted to jump into just talking about a couple of the components, and it's interesting because Stan talked a lot about this as well, the importance of the community leader. Communities, I believe, live and die by the leadership that are behind it, and the most important thing is to get the right leader in place. These were the top skills identified in our research that successful community leaders really look like. They must have passion. They must be able to facilitate the conversation. They need to be active within their own community as well. They need to have some leadership ability, things that people will be drawn to them, have some influence in getting people to participate and be a part of something like this. And there needs to be some change management communication associated with this, because you need to promote and encourage people and be able to communicate the value and the activities that are going on within the community. With this being said, our research tells us that communities operate more effectively when there are more than one leader associated with it. Having one person be a community leader can be very challenging. Within most organizations, we see 2 to 3 so that you can split some of the duties. One person might be better at the technology, one might be better at facilitation, one might be great at managing the communication, the change management. Maybe they have a lot of influence in the organization, whatever that looks like. But putting this on one person can be very challenging in an organization. So encouraging 2 or 3 people to get involved and help keep it going. People have vacations, they're gone, they get busy, whatever, you can keep that community really functioning if you have more than one. The other thing is the change management component. The ways to address change management in our research came back and said, you really got to get that leadership buy-in. You really got to get adoption and engagement, people understanding. The interesting thing to me in this research, and I don't like that this is at the top, but 34% of the people said, we don't focus on change management at all for communities. They're there, but we don't do anything to promote them. We don't do any communications around them. And that makes me a tad nervous because I think this is a big part of communities of practice. So if you're not doing it today, make sure that you're leveraging anything that you can from a communications, marketing, branding, whatever that looks like for communities in your organization. Okay. And the last one I wanted to talk about was the health. This was the other one in the checklist that I think is really important. We have some organizations that we've talked to at APQC who have regular health assessments, 6 months, 12 months. Some are very formal, some are informal. Could be surveys sent out to community leaders to find out how things are going. Could be monitoring participation rates of what's happening within the community, between attendance, between posts that are going on. There's lots and lots and lots of measures that we have that we can share with you if you're interested. I just threw a few common types of measurement up here, but there's a lot of things around adoption and participation that you can measure between the number of, like I said, the activities that are going on, the volume of content that's created, that's been shared, that's been reused, all of those things. You can measure the cost if that's important to your organization. You can look at the efficiency and the equality or the quality. So what's the average cycle time that it takes to post a question and get an answer in an online forum, things like that. The engagement and satisfaction portion is a little bit, and the member success is a lot of that qualitative, right? Asking people, is it providing the value? Are you leveraging the resources? What have you learned? Have you established more mentoring relationships? And using those member success stories, because people will really buy into the value of a community when they hear from one of their colleagues how much it helped them and how well it's improving the quality of their day-to-day work because they're part of a community of practice. So thinking about all those health from the program perspective of our communities being governed and managed effectively to how's the individual feel who's participating, right? We've got to look at all of those things, the health of the community itself and the effectiveness for the individual in the organization. But it's really, really critical to understand and show value to your leaders. This is going to help you contribute to your leadership buy-in when you can show the health of those communities and the effectiveness it has on the organization.
Lynda, I want to just point out in regard to the success stories I just posted in the chat, the idea that you can actually pull a lot of that right out from the community's discussions without any extra work. There'll be exchanges between people who are asking for help, and
Great.
someone else provides help, and then they acknowledge the help and show how it was valuable to them. If you just mine that, pull that out, you have your success stories right there.
That's perfect. That's, yeah, harvesting them from the technology you're using is a great way. And, maybe at some point in the future, we'll have an AI that will create some storylines for us, right? Pulling out of
Right.
the discussion threads, which is amazing. I love that. It's always fun to do interviews and things like that as well. But boy, when you've got a lot of that available to you already in your online discussion forums, leverage those things. Thank you. Great, great addition, Stan. I love that. All right, and we're going to close with some final advice from some mature programs, and I'll let Stan give some final words of wisdom here too. But we did a couple of case studies last year where I interviewed a couple of organizations and run very differently, but yet both extremely successful in their approach to communities of practice. One of these organizations was Framatome. They're a nuclear energy company based in France with 18,000 employees and 70 facilities in 20 countries, so very large. But they deploy communities of practice across the organization. It's been around for about 8 years. And they're also a recipient of our APQC Excellence in KM program as well. So they have something where they hold communities accountable with a pretty strict way of measuring the effectiveness. And then they get a Framatome label, right, that says this is an effective community, and it's a designation that they get, and people get excited and they can use it in their emails and all that. So they have they maintain a lot of this through some extreme executive sponsorship, and they're very I'll say robust way of measuring the success and value of their communities. And they have funding for their communities as well to go solve real problems. The other example in here is from Communities of Practice at Collins Aerospace, which is a company that's part of the Raytheon Technologies, or RTX Corporation, very large aerospace and defense. And they've had communities around for well over 20 years. And this was the quote I used earlier that Mel shared with us, that it's about making the company smaller. And even though things have adjusted over time and there's been 2 acquisitions as part of this company, one thing that has sustained these acquisitions is the community of practice program, because it's so embedded in the culture and how people work within their organization. And they, right now, their KM team roughly supports about 90 communities of practice. And on average, they have about 3,000 total global employees per month participating in communities of practice. So great success stories from both companies. And I asked them to give, what's your advice to people, right? If they're just getting started, what would you tell people? And a lot of this is probably similar to what you've already heard, but leadership support is the top priority, right? It's got to be there. But you also have to have a little bit of patience, because you're going to continue to build buy-in, right, over time, and leaders change and things happen like mergers and acquisitions or financial struggles, things like that. You got to be patient and you got to continue to build buy-in. You got to put emphasis on inclusion versus exclusion, meaning make them open, make them voluntary, let anybody come, like Stan said, right? You make them open to the company, and the people who want to be there show up and they become a part of it. Don't restrict yourself and with the metrics either. Metrics are important, and I talk about measuring the health, but you need to do what makes sense for your organization, what your leaders are interested in seeing, and what's going to truly add value to your program. Don't measure for the sake of measuring. If everyone believes in communities, don't go above and beyond to put 57 measures in place when 2 or 3 will do, okay? And be transparent and open to new ideas when community leaders come to you with new ideas and things like that. And make sure you have that reward and recognition in place for those leaders, and capture your stories. So with that, Stan, one last word, and we'll close out our webinar for the day.
My last word would be to join the SIKM Leaders Community if you're not a member. I just put a link into a discussion in response to a question about surveying your community. We have so many good discussions over the 20 years we've existed that just about anything you might be wondering about, we probably have already discussed. And so I'd recommend, if you're not a member, to join and then take advantage of that by reading the threads, participating in the calls, and if you have questions, posting them there.
I agree, Stan. I'm a member as well, everyone, and I go on and I read a lot. I post once in a great while, but I read a lot, and it helps keep me with what's going on around the world as it relates to knowledge management. And there's also calls that happen every month, right? Stan, they're every single month.
Every month, yes.
Every month. And so you can come and listen and all of that as well. So again, thank you, Stan. We love having you here at APQC to help us talk about communities and further evolve. Obviously, it's still a hot topic with the number of people we had show up today. So appreciate everyone, appreciate all of the chats and the responses and the questions, and everything will be made available to you following the webinar. And hopefully we'll see you at our next webinar on October 1st. Thank you, everyone.